Good afternoon and welcome to our webinar today on business process transformation and change management. Our presenter, Joseph McAuliffe, is sitting right here just waiting to go, but I'm just going to give you a few housekeeping tips just so the afternoon goes smoothly, and then I'll hand over to him. The slides that you see, as well as the recording of the entire webinar, will be available on our SlideShare page, as well as our YouTube channel for you to look at later, and links for this will be emailed to you in our follow-up emails. When the webinar finishes, there'll be a survey that pops up, and I would just ask that you give it a few minutes of your time, please, to give us feedback so that we can do things better. As you're listening to Joseph talk, you might have questions to ask him, and if you look down at your bottom right control panel, you'll see a little question box, and this is where you can communicate with us and talk to us. And lastly, Joseph will allocate time at the end of the webinar to answer your questions. So without any further delay, I'll hand you over to Joseph. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Sherry. Well, very quick introduction. My name is Joseph. I come from an organization called BEAT. BEAT standing for Business Excellence in Achieving Transformation. So what we try to do is actually go into organizations and have a look at them strategically, operationally, and try to transform these organizations and turn them around, make them a bit more effective, more efficient, more organized. We are based in Malta, but we have an office in Dubai, and we operate in these two regions and also exploring our opportunities in the UK. So it gives us some good exposure, some good insight into what different organizations are like. And basically what I'd like to do is just try and share some of our experiences from what we've seen with you guys. I'd be happy to answer some of your questions later on. So there we go. Okay, so we're talking about business process transformation. Some people might ask, okay, what is the concept behind business process transformation? Basically, the main thing is we've heard about continuous improvement, making things better, gradual improvement, Kaizen. At this point in time, we are thinking a bit further beyond continuous improvement. Yeah, we are seeking organization-wide changes. By no way am I saying that these are simple changes, easy changes to master. They take a lot of planning, a lot of organizing, careful decision making, and investment. Investment in time, energy, effort, money, and all that. The basic concept is that we look at the current state of affairs, assess the current state of affairs, understand what we are doing at this current point in time, knowing where we stand today. And the objective is to rethink, analyze, study, redesign a way how we can do things in the future. When planning our future state design, we need to consider various factors. We need to understand that we all live and work and operate within an environment that is constantly changing. So our future state needs to be in such a way that it is dynamic, it can evolve, and it can accept changes that are going to be imposed on us, both from operational policies, from internal governance, from legislation, from the world around us. So our future state needs to be in a way adaptable and capable to flex with needs that can come up into our organizational operation. We need to think about an operating scenario which is well suited to accept the evolution that the future might bring. Our approach when we speak to our clients, the catch is that we tell them, do not cast your future state operational activities, do not cast it into a concrete shell, because we all know that once we cast concrete solidifies. What's underneath is trapped inside. The moment that something changes in the future, in the near future, then the trouble comes up because we cannot adapt to those needs. So we need to make sure that our transformed state of operating is flexible enough to accept any future changes that might be necessary. This is all exciting stuff. It all gives us the opportunity to be innovative, to be creative, to come up with all sorts of opportunities that we would have hoped to do before and never had the time, and now we might see it's the time to do it, so we can put in our influence into the process activities, into the strategy we are adopting in the organization. But we have to make sure that we understand that here we are not talking about operations in terms of activities alone. We are talking about the way people make things. People work, people reason out, the logic. So we have to make sure that the people aspect is taken care of very, very carefully. People may make or break a transformation project. Getting people on board early, using their expertise, showing them that we care about their expertise and that we are taking it on board into our future state design is one way how we can minimize the resistive effect that such changes could bring. Okay? These changes could bring fear into people. It could make them suspect that they might have to adopt new principles that they don't accept. That they might be at the end of the line of their job, and this is not the case. Process transformation is not about knocking off people, it's about maximizing your operations, maximizing your people, your capabilities into doing things more efficiently, more effectively. Giving opportunities to people to do more interesting things. Okay, so it's a matter that we need to take care of very carefully. The starting point? The starting point is now. We need to clearly understand the current operation. Unless we understand what we are doing now, we risk designing something which is subject to past errors, past mistakes that can only repeat themselves. So understanding the current operation is key. In order for us to understand whether the transformation is successful or not, we need to make sure that we have a metric against which to measure. And therefore, understanding the current metrics, what we are achieving, the level of performance that we are achieving at this state, and then comparing that metric with that achieved after we do the transformation is one way how we can measure the success of our exercise. Having the right metrics in place is very important, and therefore we need to make sure that whatever we are measuring today is somehow transposed into the future state operation, in that we can compare the previous and the post transformation performance. That is the only way we can understand whether our exercise is reaping the benefits that we would have hoped for. A very good quotation which I normally use a lot with our clients is that we need to consider history. Sometimes people say, okay, forget whatever we do and let's start with a brand new sheet. Let's start on greenfield. That is fine, that's easy. But as we all know, each organization has its own internal culture. We cannot go away and forget completely about the culture that has evolved over the years, the operating environment, the policies inside the organization. So we must consider those and take them on board when designing the future state. We must look at what the organization, what its history has gone through, what strengths it has achieved so we can build on, and what were the areas that could have been improved, and therefore we can have the opportunity to do something about it. Right, so a key objective of transformation exercise is very basic. Putting it very simply, it's finding a better way how to do the work involved in our processes. And this might involve a number of different techniques to be adopted. Yeah, we need to identify the activities that add value, activities that might not add so much value, and therefore we might want to challenge and question those activities to identify whether we really need to do them. We need to make sure that our process is as streamlined as possible in order to give us higher effectiveness and higher efficiencies. Once we identify that the objectives we need to achieve, we obviously need to put in a plan that will help us go along with our changes. We need to have this plan which will take us from the current state to the future state. We need to know how to go about it. We need to have in place a very carefully thought implementation plan. And we make sure that we have the right controls to make sure that this plan is following the methodology that we would have planned. In defining the methodology, we can perhaps split it into two parts, two states. The first part is we need to identify which part of the processes will be transformed. This might take some time, this might take some effort, and in order to maintain the interest in the transformation exercise, we need to consider the second part of the methodology, in that we try to identify what are the quick wins we can go for, so that while the transformation is going through, people, our staff, our managers see benefits coming through regularly. Undertaking a transformation exercise, which might last a number of months, with no one seeing anything in return before a relatively long period of time, might tend to lose the interest of those people who are on the receiving end. Therefore, planning in those little achievements that we can demonstrate to our teams, to our people, that listen, as a result of these transformation exercises we're doing, look, we have achieved this improved efficiency, this improved quality, this improved throughput, this less work effort. We need to demonstrate to people that there is a positive result towards this transformation. Okay, it all helps into minimizing the fear factor in such a challenging exercise, I would say. As we all know, an organization is made up of a number of processes that link up together in one way or another, a number of sub-processes within the main processes that each one has to be coordinated together in order to deliver a result, an outcome, be it a service, be it a product, to an awaiting client. Okay, there is a need and we need to satisfy it. We satisfy this by developing a set of processes that together, coordinated together, they will give us the outcome to satisfy the need. From our experience in dealing with these organizations, which might involve a number of different processes, it is, I would say, rather rare that we have been asked to transform an organization all over. Many instances, they call that parts of the organization is transformed, and that would involve a set of processes and sub-processes. The idea here is that once we do identify which process or which set of sub-processes we are going to transform, we are going to challenge, we are going to change, this is clearly defined. We need to clearly define the boundaries of the project that is in scope. If we do not do that, we very much risk a common situation where we get what we call project creep, where we start creeping beyond what was in the original plan. As you can expect, this will eat up on our planning, on our resources, on our funding, with the risk that the original plan is not maintained, it falls over, we are delayed, we are over budget, if not jeopardizing, risking the success of the whole project. So the scope must be clearly defined, and upstream and downstream from the processes in scope, they need to be completely protected from whatever changes are happening within the process being considered for transformation. Very simplistically, let's assume that as part of our transformation exercise in the process that is in scope, we come up with some kind of automation. Let's say we put in a nice database with some reporting that can take place, and it's all automated, all paperless, and all this. In all probability, or in all likeliness, that reporting needs to be communicated, let's say, downstream. If we are communicating downstream an electronic format of reporting from the process in scope to the process downstream, provided that the process downstream does not have the capability to interpret that electronic reporting, the communication is not going to happen. We are going to have a breakdown between the process that is being transformed and downstream processes. So implementing automation within our process that is in scope is fine, as long as it can be communicated upstream or downstream to the processes that are not part of the transformation. Many a times management say, this is a great idea, let's implement the automation downstream as well, so that the report can be transferred electronically to the processes down the line. That's all good ideas, but the fact that we would not have planned it in originally means that we might be risking spilling out, creeping out of our main project plan, main resources, main time frames, and therefore risking that the original project would not have been completed as desired. Fair enough. Later on in time, after we would have implemented the project that is in scope, as a secondary phase, we might decide to implement this automation in the subsequent processes that are following downstream from the project in scope. Okay, so we insist a lot on this because people become very excited. They start seeing the benefits, the results as a result of the low-hanging fruit that we spoke of earlier. They start seeing the results from the changes achieved within the project that is in scope, and they would want to, without haste, implement those throughout the whole organization. Okay? It is not always the best idea to jump the gun to deviate so much from our original intended project plan. Okay, so that is why careful planning is very important, and maybe we need to plan in our transformation project into phases that will see things happening in the right time, in the right order, without causing any conflict in between the achievements that would have been planned originally. Therefore, the project that is in scope, the processes that are going to be in scope need to be identified clearly. As we all know, or as we should know, we know that processes normally need to flow through different business units. Okay, you might be processing an insurance claim. You might be processing a bank account. In processing that insurance claim, you will need to go through a number of different departments, a number of different functions. Okay, those functions that are going to be affected by that change need to be identified clearly. They need to be prepared for this change so that they are part of the project. We need to identify the workflows within each department, the workflows within each business unit that are going to be affected by this change. Okay, so that they are all catered on in the plan when we come to do the actual implementation, execution of the project. Transformation is a big word. Many people might tend to feel a lot of factors that might put them off actually going in for transformation. It's something bulky, something big, something scary more than anything. The only thing is that at times we just need to go through transformation exercises because we would need to take stock and clean up the effect that might have been accumulated over the years of these little, we call them piecemeal changes that might have taken place across time. Very simplistically, a model for a process, we might start with a relatively clean process to deliver the results that our organization is set out to achieve. As we all know, by time, we start adding up to that process. We start, as you might be familiar, we refer to it the mushrooming effect. It is those little build-ups that we build up onto our operational activities as business grows, as the organization grows, as the environment changes, we start adapting. Which is okay, which is all carefully planned in and put in, and we build up gradually in line to satisfy requirements. But at some points in time, we have to be careful that this mushrooming effect might make the process rather unstable. We might need to identify which of those processes that we have evolved by time are actually adding value, which are the ones that we really need to keep in, and what are those bits and pieces that might be outside of context. Okay, and through a transformation exercise, we hope to take stock of that current situation, decide what is within the red border, what needs to stay, and redesign that in order to clean it up and define a new approach. Taking transformation across the execution phase, we need to define a clear roadmap. We need to define a mechanism that will take us through. We can explain it to our teams, our superiors, our delegates, so that they understand the different phases within this roadmap that we are taking on. After analyzing the current situation and after designing the future state, we need to create the target objective, the target design that we want to achieve. In order to enable us to handle this target design into manageable chunks, we need to identify the various components that need to be handled and how these fit together so that gradually we start putting them in place, perhaps even obtaining some results out of these components, the part implementation. And we take these through a well-planned implementation strategy. Okay, we need to develop a project plan with clearly defined milestones, with clearly assigned resources that can dedicate the time, the energy, they have the knowledge to take us through this transformation. Naturally, like in any project plan, this is a project that needs to be managed with the basic principles for project management. Okay, we need to have the right controls in place to make sure that we are following in line with the plan. Sometimes we need to review the plan because if we are implementing a transformation exercise that might stretch maybe 2 or 3 years, across those 3-year period, we might identify that the objectives need revising because new legislation comes in, new policies come in, new strategies are adopted. Yeah? So the implementation plan needs to be periodically reviewed and the objectives and the strategy adapted according to the new desires that come up across the implementation plan. The least thing we want is that we come out of a 3-year implementation plan only to notice that we have implemented something that is by that time mediocre, out of date, obsolete. Okay, so we must make sure that the target objective is still valid throughout the course of the implementation plan. As the project progresses through, as the project matures through, we need to make sure that what we set out to implement originally is still valid. Therefore, the design of the new processes, we might need to review those as well. Not just the objectives, but also the design of the processes. We might be developing an automated solution in one of the processes, which will take a couple of years to implement. Throughout those couple of years, new technologies can emerge, can be deployed, that will necessitate a review in our original design. If need be, adaptation of our implementation plan. Therefore, this is all something that is live, something that is living. It's not something that we put on paper 3 years ago and we set out to implement it no matter what. We need to be switched on, we need to be sensitive to the environments around us, to the changes that are happening, and be capable of evolving our plan, adapting our plan to satisfy current needs as these come through. Naturally, we need to have all the controls in place to minimize risk of failure, to minimize risk of jeopardizing the project and spreading the costs across the project and implementing it carefully in order to maximize on the return that we would have invested in this implementation. Last but not least, most important, and maybe the most sensitive, is people. Let us not forget that in transformation is all about processes, is all about technology, but most of all, it is all about people, people, people. We need to understand that this could be a sensitive area. People need to be brought on board early. They need to be involved in the changes, involved in the design. Sometimes we tend to underestimate the expertise that people might have, and we might go off designing the processes from the office, when in fact the expertise lies on the operational floor, in the offices, in the front office desks and in customer care. We need to get the sensitivity of these people. They are the experts to feed us with their valuable information when we come to the design process. When we come to implement, we have a clear understanding that the project sponsor needs to be there. They need to support us. Okay. If we had to answer that question, what would we expect from the top senior management? The answer could be pretty simple. Putting it very simplistically, we need them to engage with the project, we need them to commit, and of course, we need them to provide the money. Those are the 3 simple answers that many of our clients would tell us. Yes, of course, we will own it, we will promote the project, yes, we will give you the right resources, and we will put the money where it belongs so that we have the right infrastructure, the right training, the right resources, and the right IT systems and what have you. The truth is, there is a difficult answer, which is a bit more challenging to achieve. Do we have the will to take this transformation through? Do we really want this transformation to go through? So we need executive management to practice, to have the will to actually make this thing happen, to make it a success. We need them to give this exercise priority. It is a very critical time when we're going through transformation, and it deserves the priority it needs. More than anything, we will find obstacles. We always find obstacles in every transformation exercise, and we need the backing of executive management to support us in removing these obstacles. Many a times we are sorry to say that we actually have obstacles put into place by executive management for whatever reasons. We won't go into those merits, but this is one of the toughest answers that we need to focus on. Yeah, we need to make sure that these guys, they will do whatever is within their powers to make sure that there are no obstacles in the way that will hinder, that will jeopardize the progress of the project. Transformation brings change, and change brings what is called fear. Many people think that change is something bad, people fear it, and people tend to resist it with all their might. I'm not a psychologist or a scientist to study the brain, but reading an article a couple of years back, neuroscientists had claimed that the human person has two elements in his capacity to accept change. One of it is what is called the working memory, and one of it is the existing mental maps. In that when people receive new information, if that information they receive they are familiar with, it is passed on to the known aspect of the brain, and it will be processed immediately. And that's easy. They know it, they are familiar with it, they get it out of the way. The moment they receive something new, therefore possibly coming through change, if it is unknown, that new information is normally pushed back into what is termed the working memory. The idea is that the brain will process this new set of information when the brain can give it its own attention, when it is available to focus and think about it. This naturally will slow down the acceptance of this new bit of information. In doing this, we tend to go on the resistive side. Therefore, when we come to think about implementing change, implementing transformation, we need to make sure that we allow sufficient time, yes, for our working memory elements within our brain to absorb this information, to become more familiar with it, to process it, and to come to terms with it. Therefore, implementing change without being sensitive to the timing for implementing that change could actually be a negative aspect that we might bring on ourselves in terms of implementing the change, in terms of taking through our transformation project. Therefore, a critical element in transformation is properly taught change management approaches. We normally classify change management into three elements. The strategic one is our organization. Should we rethink what we do, how we do it? Should we rethink our service line, our product delivery? Should we think of something totally new as a concept? And that needs to be managed from a strategic aspect. Decisions need to be taken by senior management based on market trends, based on performance, based on capabilities and things like that. The technology change management needs to cater for adapting our systems in line with what we decide we want to implement strategically. Do we have the right tools, the right techniques, the right methodologies? The IT side is a vital tool that is needed in transformation. Okay, we are living in the time where the data generated is massive, and possibly most of our organizations will not succeed, will not perform unless they are backed up by strong, adequate technology tools. Let us not make the technology tool the hindrance, the barrier to implement the change. Okay, changes can happen, benefits can be achieved even if we don't have the right technology put in place yet. The technology there is just a tool. Organizational change management is all about making sure that the rollout of the transformation happens in a structured, in an organized manner. Functions defined with target objectives. People trained, capabilities put in place, skills reviewed and upgraded, processes well defined in order to make sure that the transformation happens in a successful manner. We need to manage these three aspects of change management concurrently in order to make sure that there is a higher probability of success. It is a very vast subject. It is up to our discretion whether we go for transformation, whether it is time to undertake transformation. And basically the idea is that it is up to us to decide. Okay, survival is not mandatory, as Dr. Deming had once quoted. Okay, it's up to us. We make that decision. It is not an easy time. It is not an easy task to overcome, but being done carefully with the commitment, with the will of executive management, of the sponsors, with the right guidance from the right expertise, it is something that is achievable, not to be feared as much as many people might fear it, as long as the approach is taken through in a careful, well-planned and well-managed approach. That is effectively what I wanted to share with you. They are merely some thoughts and some reflections of what we see when we are undertaking transformation exercises in different organizations. We do welcome you to pop in some questions if you would like, and we will try our best to answer any questions that might come through. Okay, so we see some questions coming in. Processes are results of decisions taken with respect to strategy. So does this also mean that we have to reevaluate the strategy during the transformation? Strategy, as we said, is a very important element. We have to plan out what we tend to achieve. Our organizational direction needs to be clearly defined. So our organization is there to deliver a need, a customer need, nothing else. How we deliver that need needs to be planned into our processes. The processes that we need to deliver those outcomes need to be clearly set out in our strategic objectives. And therefore, the strategy, how we go about implementing these things, needs to be clearly defined. So yes, strategy needs to be rethought, it needs to be re-evaluated so that we make sure that we are all aligned and understand what we seek to achieve. Do we need to also evaluate the milestones? And how often should this be done? That is a very good question. I was debating this with some colleagues of mine earlier on today, actually. How often should we review our milestones? Well, I don't think there is one simple answer to this question. It very much depends on the dynamics within your organization. If you are within a fast-moving industry, your milestones might be changing very fast, and therefore you must make sure that the milestones you set to achieve are in line with what the environment is demanding of you. If you are in a slower moving industry, in a slower moving organization, where the sector does not demand so many frequent changes, a milestone that you might have set within your objectives to achieve might still be valid after some time. So it very much depends. The frequency with which you reevaluate your objectives, your targets, your goals, your milestones very much depends within the industry you are operating in. As we all know, I mean, in the telecommunications industry, things change so fast. Having milestones to redevelop a new software to be used in your smartphones with a milestone to achieve the first update in 2 years' time is definitely a no-go. Because we all know that every other week we all receive software updates that we need to download into our devices. On the other hand, maybe if you are operating in more stable environments, perhaps in certain industries, in certain parts of the world, for example, the financial, the legal is maybe a slower environment. Maybe laws don't change overnight. So maybe there, reviewing your milestones in achieving certain compliance to certain legislation or certain regulations might not be as dynamic as it might be in the telecoms or in the electronics industry. Yeah, so one has to, I believe, one has to adapt his review. He has to sense, he has to be switched on and identify how sensitive his plans are compared with the environment they are operating within. Training people comes at a cost. Yes, of course it does. Does the transformation also look into reducing churn-out for people? What we seek to achieve is that through transformation, we don't jeopardize people's assurance of their job. We don't want people to fear their job because of a transformation. What we want to do is, on the contrary, identify what changes need to happen in the process, identify what skills we need to achieve the outcomes from the revised processes, and give an opportunity to our people to skill up their capabilities to satisfy the future needs. If some people can actually shift over to some other areas within the organization, perhaps doing some more interesting activities, we can give them opportunities for even career advancement. Yes, maybe today you have 5 people doing a transaction-based operation, and by introducing some process changes, some automation, perhaps you might need only 3 people to do that. Those 2 people that you have who might have very broad experience from the years they might have been operational, you might use them perhaps for research, for marketing, for developing new business trends. Yes, so you give them an opportunity to actually achieve more than what they would be doing before the transformation takes place. Can you also share the slides with all participants? They will be put online on the Informa website, on YouTube. Yes, so yes, they will be shared. All right, another comment. As we all know, change management is a very critical step in transformation, 100% agreed. What are the tools we can use to implement change management, like workshops and training, and from the beginning of the assignment? Right. I wish I could draw, but I cannot draw a little sketch that I normally use when I explain this. But when we take a decision to conduct a change, okay, that change, if it is a strategic change, that decision is going to be taken by the right authorities, correct? And the right authorities, let's take a very simple example. Let's take a very simple example, which is possibly very common. Yes, an organization has outgrown its current facilities. Yes, and it needs to move on to better offices, bigger settings, better layouts. The decision to move offices or to move factory, to move the plant, is going to be taken at strategic level by the right authorities. That is the black box, which is a non-negotiable element of the whole exercise. Now, in all fairness, how I lay out the new office, I might have my own preference if I were the CEO of the organization. But in reality, does it really matter whether the desks look face north or the desks face south, whether they are put into a classroom style, whether they are put into islands? So when we come to implement this change in our offices, elements of this change are non-negotiable. The office is going to change. Where we are going to go? Maybe it is a strategic decision. Should we move to the north of the country? Should we move to the south of the country? Where does it make best sense? Those are decisions that maybe could be taken by strategic people after they would have done their research and these things. But in laying out the new setup, if we had to get a layout plan and just put in desks as they go along, and we lay them out and present them to our teams to populate them and start operating, the chances are that these people will be resistive in the way they have been laid out. But on the other hand, if we bring in their expertise and ask them, listen guys, we are moving the offices. We are going to the north of the country because that's where the business is and that's where it makes strategic sense for us to be. You are the experts of the process. Tell us how best to lay out the offices so that we minimize moving around, so that we minimize process hiccups. Bringing people on board early, making them part of that decision is all part of the ownership. It's extracting their expertise into the change, and therefore they will feel integrated, they will feel engaged with the process. So yes, we do believe very much so that at the right points in time you start involving your people with the right level of information. Okay, it has to be carefully planned out. It doesn't mean you have to give them all the information at once. It might be baffling, it might be confidential, but if you start disseminating the right level of information at the right time, involving the right people, the people who are on the works in the operation and the process, you might tend to get the opportunity that you get their engagement and their commitment to support you more in the changes. Right. There don't seem to be any more questions. So I guess at this point in time we will close off this webinar. You will have some questions to give us your feedback, so please do give us your feedback in that sense. The slides will be shared, and we hope you enjoyed this webinar. Until we meet again, cheerio. Thank you very much.